Usually when we dive into personal finance, there is this expectation of, well, therapy.
Oh, absolutely. Financial therapy.
Right. It's all about, how you feel about your money. It's about your spending habits or like the guilt of buying that daily latte.
The emotional weight of carrying a balance.
Yes,
Oh.
exactly. Traditional advice kind of assumes you are this fragile creature who needs behavioral modification through tiny emotional rewards.
It treats the symptom, the anxiety. It completely ignores the mathematical disease. I mean, the traditional financial ecosystem functions entirely on this premise.
Which premise?
The premise that consumers are driven by psychological pacification rather than, well, cold, hard ledger analysis.
Right. Which brings us to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at a financial landscape today that is completely, ruthlessly devoid of emotion.
It really is.
We're unpacking a source text called the Wealth Velocity Manifesto, Escaping the Amortization Loop. And its central thesis is just a violent rejection of that financial therapy we were just talking about.
Violent is definitely the right word for it. The language in this thing is intense.
Very intense. But the manifesto argues that institutions, like the massive banks, the credit card conglomerates, they actually rely on your emotional approach.
They bank on it, literally.
Right. They have built this incredibly sophisticated ecosystem designed to systematically drain your wealth over decades.
Uh-huh.
And they succeed precisely because, well, you are too busy feeling guilty about your debt to look at the raw data.
You're distracted by the shame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. Treating debt emotionally is like trying to lose weight by just feeling incredibly guilty every time you eat, rather than, actually sitting down and mathematically counting your macronutrients.
That's a great way to put it.
Guilt is exhausting, and it doesn't burn a single calorie.
And guilt certainly doesn't pay down principal either.
No, it does not.
Think about how a massive corporation handles its balance sheet. A Fortune 500 company doesn't feel guilty about its corporate bonds.
Right, the CEO isn't losing sleep over the moral weight of a vendor payment.
Exactly. They don't pay off a small vendor early just to get a psychological dopamine hit from crossing an item off a to-do list.
That would be ridiculous.
It would be terrible business. A corporate treasury looks at interest rates, they analyze capital efficiency, and they deploy capital where it mathematically neutralizes the highest threat to the bottom line.
Just raw numbers.
Just raw data. And the manifesto is demanding that you, the individual listening to this right now, adopt that exact same data-driven mindset.
Because you are a corporation of one.
Yes. Your debt is not a moral failing. It is simply a data set that needs to be neutralized.
Okay, but before we talk about how to neutralize it, we really have to talk about the trap itself.
The amortization loop.
Right. The title of this text mentioned escaping the amortization loop. We throw that word around a lot, amortization, especially when people buy houses or cars.
But most people don't really know what it means.
I don't think they understand the violent mathematics happening underneath the hood, like of a standard 30-year mortgage or a 5-year auto loan.
They really don't.
The manifesto spends a massive amount of time breaking down why amortization is the ultimate weapon used against the consumer.
Yeah.
Let's actually look at the mechanics of this. How does the loop function?
Well, it functions through the weaponization of time and front-loaded interest. Let's build a tangible scenario for the listener.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine taking out a standard $300,000 mortgage, let's say at a 7% interest rate over 30 years.
Pretty standard numbers right now.
Very standard. Now, the traditional financial system presents you with a single palatable number, your monthly payment.
Right, they make it simple.
Exactly. Let's say it's roughly $2,000 a month for principal and interest. The consumer looks at that $2,000, looks at their monthly income, and thinks, well, I can afford that.
Because it feels manageable.
Right. They view the transaction as a flat, linear arrangement.
Well, because the billing statement makes it look linear.
Okay.
I mean, you pay $2,000 in January, you pay $2,000 in February. It feels like you are steadily chipping away at the house.
But that linear feeling is a carefully constructed user interface.
An interface designed to hide reality.
Precisely. It hides a highly nonlinear mathematical reality. In the first month of that 30-year mortgage, out of your $2,000 payment, approximately $1,750 goes directly to the bank as pure interest.
Wait, $1,750?
Yes. Only $250 goes toward actually reducing the $300,000 you owe.
That is insane. You're paying a 700% markup on the actual principal reduction?
Exactly a 700% markup.
Which means after an entire year of making those payments, I mean, sending the bank $24,000 in cold hard cash, you have barely shaved $3,000 off the actual debt.
You still owe $297,000.
After paying $24,000, that hurts just to say out loud.
It's brutal. But the amortization schedule is engineered that way on purpose. It guarantees the institution extracts its maximum profit in the first 5 to 10 years of the loan.
Why the first 5 to 10 years specifically?
Because they have massive amounts of data showing that the average consumer sells their house or refinances every 7 years.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
Right. So if you refinance in year 7, you haven't actually paid off any meaningful principal. You've just spent 7 years renting the money at the highest possible cost.
And then what happens? You start the 30-year clock all over again with a new loan.
Exactly. That right there is the amortization loop.
You are just trapped in a perpetual cycle of front-loaded interest payments,
generating massive risk-free yield for the institution, while your own net worth remains entirely stagnant.
And the Manifesto introduces a concept here that really blew my mind regarding how we measure this trap. It talks about the effective spread.
Yes, the effective spread is a crucial concept here.
Usually when I think of the spread, I just think of, the difference between the interest rate the bank charges me and the interest rate they pay me on my savings account.
Right, the traditional definition. But the text takes that a step further. It redefines effective spread as the mathematical reality of your money's alternative potential, adjusted for inflation and taxes.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's say you have a loan at 8%, and you also have an investment portfolio generating an average 7% return.
Most people would look at that and think it's roughly a wash, a 1% difference.
Exactly. They think it balances out. But the Manifesto points out that your 7% market return is taxable.
Ah, right. Taxes.
Depending on your bracket, your real yield might only be 5.5%. Your 8% debt, however, is a post-tax absolute. You are paying it with dollars that have already been taxed.
Oh, man. So the effective spread, the actual wealth you are bleeding out every single day by carrying that debt while chasing market yield, is far worse than the raw numbers suggest.
Paying off an 8% loan isn't the equivalent of making an 8% market return.
Because a guaranteed risk-free, tax-free 8% return does not exist in the traditional financial markets.
Exactly. It does not exist. By eliminating that debt, you are capturing an effective spread that beats almost any safe investment vehicle on the planet.
Which serves as the foundational logic for everything else the Manifesto proposes.
It has to be the foundation. To escape the loop, you must first acknowledge that your ledger is hemorrhaging capital through these invisible front-loaded mechanisms.
And that capturing the effective spread by neutralizing high-interest liabilities is the absolute highest mathematically sound use of your capital.
Exactly. That is the only logical conclusion.
So if the goal is to capture that spread and break the loop, we have to look at the weapons we have available.
And in this system, your weapons are every single penny you earn.
The Manifesto establishes this core philosophy, right? It calls it absolute capital efficiency.
Absolute capital efficiency, yes.
The rule is simply 1C is 1C, 1 cent is 1 cent. The text argues fiercely that a dollar saved in avoided interest is mathematically identical to a dollar earned in yield.
But there is no such thing as insignificant money in this framework.
Right. Every cent is what they call a deployable asset.
You see, the banking matrix relies heavily on the consumer's perception of insignificance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we have been trained to categorize our money into mental buckets. We think of a $5,000 bonus as, significant money that needs a plan.
Right. You sit down and decide where the $5,000 goes.
Exactly. But we think of the $314 sitting idle in our checking account at the end of the month as insignificant.
But you just let it sit there.
We let it sit there, we let it bleed purchasing power to inflation, or we ignore the $15 monthly trailing interest on a small personal loan because it's, quote-unquote, just the cost of a couple of coffees.
Yeah, that phrasing exactly. Just a couple of coffees.
The Manifesto identifies this mental bucketing as a fatal flaw in wealth building.
Okay, I understand the mathematical purity of saying every penny matters, but we have to address the human element here, right?
The human element is usually where these systems fail, yes.
Exactly, because adopting a mindset where you are literally micromanaging the deployment of $3.14 sounds like a fast track to severe decision fatigue.
It sounds exhausting.
Right. Human willpower is a finite resource. If I'm expending mental energy tracking pennies to ensure absolute capital efficiency, aren't I going to burn out?
That is the risk, yes.
Won't that exhaustion lead me to make a massive, catastrophic financial mistake somewhere else?
Right.
Like impulse buying a car because I'm so sick of obsessing over my checking account balance.
The concern about decision fatigue is completely valid, and it's why the text ultimately pushes for aggressive automation, which we will definitely get into.
Okay, good.
But initially, the manifesto demands this hyper-awareness because you have to understand the concept of net worth velocity.
Net worth velocity.
Yes, your net worth is not a static number on a spreadsheet. It is a kinetic entity. It has a speed, a trajectory. It is either accelerating upward or decelerating downward.
So it's always moving.
Always. Any idle cash, any ignored trailing interest, any money sitting in a 0% account is friction. It is actively slowing your velocity.
So the goal isn't just to track the pennies to be cheap. The goal is to eliminate the friction.
Exactly. To win the game the banks are playing, the text insists there can be absolutely zero idle cash on your ledger.
Zero.
Zero. Money must exist in only one of two states. It is either actively yielding capital in a protected reserve, or it is acting as what the author terms a kinetic strike against an amortizing liability.
A kinetic strike. I have to say, reading through this manifesto, the language is incredibly intense.
Very militaristic.
Yeah. You are a net worth predator launching kinetic strikes against the banking matrix. It sounds like we are trading derivatives in a war room somewhere.
I know, it's a bit much at first glance.
I found myself chuckling at how aggressive the terminology is. But, I mean, I also recognize what they're doing. It is a psychological reframing.
That's exactly what it is.
If I look at the $500 sitting in my checking account as just, extra grocery money, I'm highly likely to just blow it on takeout.
But if you view that $500 as ammunition...
Exactly. If I view it as ammunition and my 22% credit card balance is the enemy actively breaching the walls of my financial fortress, then leaving that $500 in the checking account feels like I am letting my soldiers sleep in the barracks during a siege.
That's the exact mindset shift they want. The aggressive language creates a sense of urgency that counteracts the apathy the banks rely on.
Because the banks want you apathetic.
They want your money sleeping. The manifesto's language is designed to wake you up to the reality that a 22% interest rate is, mathematically speaking, a financial emergency.
It really is.
It is a fire burning through your future purchasing power. You do not let a fire burn just because you only have a small bucket of water. You throw the water.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit. If every penny is a soldier, and I'm throwing every available dollar as a kinetic strike against my high-interest debt, what happens when I hit a landmine?
What kind of landmine?
Like, what happens when my car's transmission detonates or my roof starts leaking? If I have achieved this absolute capital efficiency by deploying all my cash to my credit card, my bank account is at zero.
Right.
I have no soldiers left. The only way to fix the transmission is to use the credit card, plunging right back into the high-interest debt I was just fighting. The entire strategy just collapses.
Which is why the architecture of this system requires you to build your armor before you launch your attack.
Okay, the armor.
Yes. Aggressive debt payoff without defensive liquidity is financial suicide. You cannot wage this war if your supply lines are exposed.
That makes sense.
This leads us to a concept the manifesto treats with utmost reverence. They call it the bankruptcy threshold.
Now, when I first read bankruptcy threshold, I just assumed they were talking about a standard emergency fund.
Most people do.
You know the classic advice. Save 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high-yield savings account before you invest. But this is structurally very different from a rainy day fund, isn't it?
Radically different. A traditional 3 to 6 month emergency fund is a macroeconomic buffer.
Macroeconomic, meaning big picture.
Right. It's designed to protect you against a massive, catastrophic life event, like a prolonged period of unemployment or a major medical crisis.
Sure.
The bankruptcy threshold, however, is a microeconomic shock absorber. It is a hyper-specific, mathematically calculated cash floor in your primary operating account that you swear an oath never to drop below.
I visualize it kind of like the reserve oxygen tank in scuba diving.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
It is not there to make your dive more comfortable. It is a hard, non-negotiable physical limit. If you tap into the reserves, the dive is over. You surface immediately. It is the absolute line between survival and drowning.
And what are you surviving against in this financial scenario? Not the broken transmission. You are surviving against systemic timing shocks.
Timing shocks.
Yes. The text is utterly obsessed with the mechanics of cash flow. Let's look at the fragility of the average consumer's ledger.
Okay.
Most people have their entire financial life automated today. Your paycheck is direct deposited on the 1st and the 15th. Your mortgage auto drafts on the 2nd. Your car payment auto drafts on the 16th.
Right, and your utility bills just pull whenever they feel like it.
Exactly. The entire system relies on the assumption of perfect, frictionless timing.
Which works beautifully until a server crashes somewhere.
Precisely.
Wait.
Let's run a disaster scenario. It's Friday the 1st. Your company's payroll provider experiences a catastrophic software glitch. They announce that payroll will be delayed until Monday the 4th.
Oh, no.
This is a 72-hour delay, not a job loss, just a slight mechanical delay in the transfer of funds.
If you are practicing absolute capital efficiency the wrong way and running your checking account down to 0 every month to attack debt, that 72-hour delay destroys you.
It initiates a total cascade of systemic failure. Monday morning, your mortgage auto draft attempts to pull $2,000. It bounces.
Ouch.
Your bank hits you with a $35 non-sufficient funds fee. The mortgage company hits you with a $50 return payment fee.
It just seems to pile it on.
And because the mortgage payment failed, your loan servicer flags your account as delinquent, which triggers a notification to the credit bureaus.
Your credit score takes a hit.
Immediately. And simultaneously, your credit card auto draft fails. The credit card company revokes your promotional 0% interest rate and slams you into a 29.99% penalty APR, retroactive to your entire existing balance.
All because of a 72-hour software glitch at a payroll company you don't even work for?
Exactly. You didn't lose your job, you didn't overspend, you were mathematically destroyed by a timing mismatch.
That is terrifying.
The bankruptcy threshold is engineered exclusively to prevent this cascade. The Manifesto provides a very specific mathematical directive called the 72-hour rule.
Okay, what's the rule? How do we calculate it?
You must audit your past 90 days of operational cash flow. You calculate your absolute highest concentration of automated liabilities in any 3-day window.
Any 3-day window?
Yes. Then you calculate the total net cash of one standard payroll deposit. Your bankruptcy threshold is the exact dollar amount required to ensure that if your largest paycheck is delayed by exactly 72 hours during your heaviest billing cycle, your ledger does not drop below 0.
Let me make sure I've got this. So let's say my heaviest billing window is the 1st of the month, where my mortgage, car, and insurance all hit, and that totaled $3,000.
Okay.
My threshold isn't just an arbitrary $1,000 buffer. My threshold is mathematically set at $3,000. I must keep $3,000 in my primary checking account at all times.
Yes. That $3,000 is your armor. It is a permanent fixture of your ledger. If your company gets hacked and your money is 3 days late, your life does not change.
Your mortgage clears, your credit card's clear.
You do not incur a single penalty fee. You don't trigger a penalty APR. You remain entirely insulated from the chaos of the matrix.
Oh, wait, I have to play the skeptic again here.
Please do.
Doesn't keeping a massive $3,000 buffer sitting in a zero-interest checking account completely violate the rule of absolute capital efficiency?
I see where you're going.
Right, because a few minutes ago we established that idle cash is friction. Now you're telling me I have to intentionally keep thousands of dollars totally idle. That seems completely contradictory.
It does seem that way at first.
Why wouldn't I keep that threshold money in a high-yield savings account where it can at least earn 4 or 5% and just transfer it over if there's an emergency?
That is the exact trap the text warns about. You are looking at the 5% yield and ignoring the mechanism of access.
The mechanism of access.
Yes. Remember, the threat we are defending against is a timing shock. High-yield savings accounts, especially those held at separate online institutions to chase the best rates, operate on the ACH network.
The automated clearinghouse.
Right. ACH transfers are not instantaneous. They take 1 to 3 business days to settle.
Oh. And they don't process on weekends.
They do not process on weekends or federal holidays. So let's revisit the disaster scenario.
Okay. Friday glitch.
It's Friday. Your payroll is delayed. Your mortgage is set to draft on Saturday. You see the problem. You log into your high-yield savings account, and you initiate a transfer of your $3,000 buffer to your checking account.
But because it's Friday, the ACH network doesn't process it.
Saturday and Sunday are dead days. The money won't arrive in your primary checking account until Tuesday.
So the mortgage bounces on Saturday. The cascade of failure happens anyway, even though I technically had the money.
The money was mathematically yours, but mechanically inaccessible. You sacrificed your armor to chase a 5% yield,
And 5% on $3,000 is roughly, what, $150 a year?
which is $12.50 a month. You risked a total credit collapse, penalty APRs, and hundreds of dollars in overdraft fees, all to earn $12 a month.
Wow. When you put it like that, it's a terrible trade.
The manifesto argues that the lost yield on your bankruptcy threshold is not a loss. It is the premium you pay for a highly specialized insurance policy against timing shocks.
The cost of defense. That makes absolute sense.
It's non-negotiable.
Okay, so we have audited our cash flow. We have calculated our 72-hour threshold. We've deposited that money into the primary account, and we have mentally locked it away. It is not our money anymore. It is the wall defending the castle.
Perfect.
Now we look at the surplus. The capital we have left over to launch our kinetic strikes. How do we choose our targets?
This brought us to the core conflict between the manifesto and the modern financial entertainment complex.
Financial entertainment complex. I love that phrase.
When you have multiple liabilities, a car loan, student loans, 3 different credit cards, a medical bill, the order in which you attack them dictates the timeline of your financial freedom.
Right.
And the industry standard advice on this topic is something the manifesto seeks to absolutely obliterate.
The debt snowball. We have to talk about the debt snowball.
We do.
If you have listened to any mainstream personal finance radio show or read any best-selling money book in the last 20 years, you have been taught the snowball method.
It is everywhere. And the premise of the snowball is purely behavioral psychology. It operates on the theory that humans are inherently irrational and require constant, tangible proof of progress to maintain discipline.
So the methodology is simple, right? You list all your debts from the smallest dollar balance to the largest, completely ignoring the interest rate.
Completely ignoring them.
You pay minimums on everything, and you throw all your surplus cash at the smallest balance until it's gone.
So if you have a $500 medical bill at 0% interest, a $4,000 car loan at 6%, and a $15,000 credit card at 24%, the snowball dictates you attack the $500 medical bill first.
And, I mean, the logic makes a certain kind of intuitive sense. When you pay off that $500 bill, you get to close an account.
Right, you get a win.
You log in, the balance is zero. The cognitive load of having one less creditor in your life feels amazing.
Yeah.
You get a massive hit of dopamine, a feeling of victory, and you take that motivation and roll it into attacking the $4,000 car loan. You build momentum.
The manifesto calls this emotional pacification, and it ruthlessly rejects the entire concept.
Ruthlessly.
The text argues that by utilizing the snowball method, you are literally paying the bank a premium cash fee to buy a temporary feeling of accomplishment.
Because while you were focused on the $500 bill that wasn't charging you a single dime, the $15,000 credit card was compounding at 24%.
Yeah.
It's actively growing.
The alternative and the absolute mandate of this system is the mathematical avalanche.
The avalanche.
The avalanche priority demands that you rank every single liability strictly by its effective spread, its annual percentage rate. You sort from highest APR descending to the lowest. You become entirely blind to the balance sizes.
So under the avalanche, the $15,000 credit card at 24% becomes target number 1. And the $500 medical bill at 0% goes straight to the very bottom of the list. You execute maximum capital force against the 24% debt, month after month, grinding away at the massive principal.
The math proves incontrovertibly that the avalanche is the fastest way to reach zero liability across a portfolio, and it results in the absolute lowest amount of total capital surrendered to the institutions.
The math is undisputed. But again, we don't live in spreadsheets, we live in reality.
True.
Let's do a deep dive into the psychology of this, because I think the manifesto actually addresses the human element here brilliantly through what they call the pre-mortem. They know exactly why people fail at the avalanche.
They do. A pre-mortem is an analytical exercise where you assume your project has failed catastrophically in the future, and you work backward to determine exactly what killed it.
Okay.
The text identifies the ultimate point of failure for this entire system. They call it the snowball relapse trap.
Walk me through a simulation of the relapse. Let's create a fictional profile. Let's call him Profile B, attempting the avalanche. He has the exact setup we just discussed. The $15,000 monster credit card at 24% and the tiny $500 medical bill at 0%.
Okay, Profile B. He reads the manifesto, he understands the math, he is highly motivated.
Right.
He establishes his defensive threshold, and he has a surplus of $500 a month to deploy as a kinetic strike.
Mm.
Under the Avalanche, he points that $500 weapon directly at the $15,000 credit card.
So month 1, he fires $500. Month
Wow.
2, another $500. Month 3, another $500. He is grinding. He is living frugally, skipping vacations, bringing his lunch to work.
And after 6 months, he has deployed $3,000 of hard-earned capital against the credit card.
A huge effort.
But here is the brutal mathematical reality of a 24% interest rate. Because the bank is charging him roughly $300 a month just in interest, his $500 strike is only reducing the core principal by $200.
Wow, that is painful.
Over 6 months, he deployed $3,000, but his balance only dropped from $15,000 to roughly $13,800.
He looks at his spreadsheet. He has sacrificed for half a year. He is utterly exhausted, and the massive mountain of debt still looks basically insurmountable.
And worse, out of the corner of his eye, he sees that $500 medical bill still sitting there on the ledger.
It's taunting him.
He hasn't closed a single account. He hasn't experienced a single tangible victory. His brain is starving for the dopamine hit of progress. The psychological friction just becomes unbearable.
So what happens in month 7?
Month 7 is the relapse. Profile B looks at his $500 surplus for the month. He knows the math says it should go to the credit card, but the emotional pacification is too tempting.
He starts rationalizing it.
Exactly. He tells himself, I just need a quick win to keep going. I just need to get one of these debts out of my life. He abandons the Avalanche, he takes the $500, he pays off the medical bill, and he closes the account.
And he gets the dopamine hit. He feels great for a week.
But the reality of the ledger is unforgiving. He took $500 of deployable assets and fired it at an enemy that was causing zero damage.
Meanwhile, the credit card charged him another $275 in interest that month.
He literally allowed the 24% fire to grow just so he could feel good about extinguishing a candle. He traded immense mathematical progress for a fleeting feeling.
The manifesto has a quote here that is incredibly stark. It says, "The Avalanche does not care about your feelings. Mathematics is immune to your exhaustion."
It is a very harsh truth.
It acknowledges that you will be in the trenches for a very long time on that first high-interest target. You have to endure a psychological grind that feels like you are, I don't know, emptying a swimming pool with a teaspoon.
It demands a complete rewiring of your neurochemistry. You have to stop getting your dopamine from the artificial high of closing a tiny account.
So where do you get it?
You must train yourself to extract profound psychological satisfaction from calculating exactly how much future compound interest you just annihilated.
Ah,
When you strike the principal of a 24% credit card, you aren't just paying down debt. You are mathematically destroying the bank's future profit models. That destruction must become your reward.
you find joy in neutralizing the enemy's compounding engine. I love that.
It's empowering.
Which leads us to the most fascinating, actionable revelation in this entire text. We've established the armor. We've established the target priority. Now, the manifesto reveals the insider mechanics of exactly when to execute the strike.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting.
This brings us to the concept of intercepting daily compounding.
This is the section of the text that transitions the reader from playing defense to actively exploiting the vulnerabilities in the banking matrix's own software.
It completely shatters a deeply held illusion that almost every consumer operates under. I certainly did before reading this.
The illusion of the monthly cycle.
Right. Most of us believe that the interest on our mortgage or our car loan or our personal loan is essentially baked in on a monthly cycle. You receive a statement in the mail on the 15th. It says your payment is $1,000 and $400 of that is interest.
And you assume that $400 is a fixed statting fee for that specific month, like rent.
Exactly. You pay it on the 28th and you move on to the next month's fixed fee.
But the monthly billing cycle is a facade. It is a simplified user interface constructed by the institutions for your convenience, sure, but primarily for their profit.
It obscures the truth.
It obscures the hyper-aggressive mathematical engine running continuously in the background. The truth is, institutional debt does not calculate interest monthly. The vast majority of amortized loans and revolving credit lines calculate interest daily.
Every single day. A microscopic tax applied every 24 hours.
Yes. They run an automated algorithmic calculation based on your outstanding principal balance at exactly midnight every single night.
So if you owe $100,000 at midnight on Tuesday, they calculate a daily fraction of your annual interest rate against that 100,000, and they add that tiny amount to your total burden.
And then on Wednesday night, they do it again.
Let me use an analogy to illustrate why the monthly mindset is so destructive against a daily engine.
Go for it.
Imagine checking into a hotel. The rule is you are charged for the room based on whether you are occupying it at midnight. You decide to check out, but instead of packing your bags and leaving on Thursday morning, you sit in the lobby all day.
Okay.
You wait until 11:59 p.m. on Thursday night to officially hand in your key. The hotel charges you for the entirety of Thursday because you waited until the absolute last possible minute to settle the transaction.
That is an incredibly precise analogy for how consumers handle their money. Let's look at the actual timeline.
Yeah.
You get paid by your employer on the first of the month. The money drops into your checking account. But your mortgage payment isn't technically due until the 25th.
And traditional advice says, just set up an auto draft for the 25th.
So your money sits in your zero-interest checking account from the 1st to the 25th.
It sits in the lobby.
Exactly. For 24 days, the bank is running its midnight calculation against your massive, unreduced principal balance. They are taxing you heavily every single night. On the 25th, you finally make the payment.
But the damage is done.
You reduced the principal, but you allowed the bank to maximize its yield for 3.5 weeks while you held the capital.
So the Manifesto solution is what they call high-frequency principal strikes. If the bank's weapon is the midnight clock, our weapon is velocity. We have to intercept the calculation.
You step inside their decision loop. The text dictates that you abandon the monthly payment paradigm entirely. If your goal is absolute capital efficiency, you must deploy your capital the literal moment it clears your account.
So if I get paid bi-weekly on alternating Fridays, I do not wait until the end of the month to make a lump sum payment.
Never. The exact hour that Friday paycheck clears into your account, you execute a strike against the principal of your top avalanche target.
Because if the money hits my account at 9 a.m. on Friday, and I immediately push it to the loan servicer by 10 a.m. when the bank's mainframe runs its calculation at midnight on Friday,
the principal balance is lower. The algorithmic tax calculated for Friday night is permanently reduced. Saturday's tax is reduced. Sunday's tax is reduced.
you have mathematically intercepted their compounding engine and turned it against them.
By striking every 2 weeks instead of once a month, you are systematically starving the daily calculation. Over the life cycle of a 30-year mortgage or a massive student loan, intercepting that midnight clock by just 2 weeks, every single cycle, destroys a staggering amount of the bank's projected profit.
You shave years off the amortization timeline without deploying a single extra dollar. You are simply utilizing the physics of time.
It is brilliant because you aren't doing anything illegal, you aren't exploiting a software glitch. You are just forcing the system to obey its own rules faster than it wants to.
It's financial judo.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the entire philosophy down. We understand the effective spread. We know the 1C is 1C rule. We have the defensive threshold set up. We have the avalanche target locked. And we understand the daily compounding clock.
The theory is complete. But a manifesto without a mechanism is just a philosophical complaint.
Right. How do we build this machine? How do we take all these incredibly intense concepts and wire them together in reality so we can actually execute?
The source text concludes with the implementation directive. It's a rigid blueprint for transitioning from a passive interest payer into the net worth predator we talked about earlier. Let's walk through the architecture of this execution.
Okay, let's break it down into steps.
The architecture requires absolute discipline in its sequencing. You cannot skip steps. Step 1 is establishing the baseline, which we already discussed. You calculate the 72-hour payroll delay buffer, you fund it, and you lock it. That is your shield.
Got it. Step 2 is constructing the matrix. You pull the data on every liability you owe, you strip away the emotional weight, you ignore the balance sizes, and you sort them purely by APR descending.
The highest rate is crowned as the singular target. Everything else becomes background noise.
Step 3 manages that background noise. You automate the minimums, you set up recurring drafts for the absolute minimum contractual payment on every debt, including your primary target.
This is defensive. It ensures your credit profile remains flawless, protecting you from penalty APRs. These minimum payments simply become fixed operational expenses, draining from your account automatically.
So the shield is up, the target is locked, the perimeter is secured. Now we arrive at step 4, which is deploying the weapon.
This is the execution of the high-frequency strike using 100% of your remaining surplus capital.
But this is where the manifesto drops a mechanical warning that, frankly, made my blood boil when I read it.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Because it reveals exactly how the banking institutions have engineered their software interfaces to trick you, to purposefully neutralize the exact strategy we just outlined.
It is the ultimate defense mechanism of the amortization loop. The text refers to it as the suspense account trap. And if the listener takes nothing else away from this deep dive, they must understand this specific mechanical detail, or the entire velocity strategy will fail.
Break this down for us. Let's say I get my biweekly paycheck on Friday. I have $500 of surplus capital. I log into my auto loan servicer's online portal at 10 a.m. I see a big friendly button that says, make a payment.
Right.
I click it, I type in $500, I hit submit, and I log out, feeling like an absolute genius because I just intercepted the midnight compounding clock. What actually just happened?
What likely happened is that you just gave the bank an interest-free loan for 3 weeks. When you use the default, make a payment interface and send an amount larger than your scheduled monthly minimum, or if you send a payment out of cycle, the bank's automated systems do not natively assume you want that money applied to the core principal balance.
Why wouldn't they assume that? I'm sending money to pay down the debt?
Because it is fundamentally against their mathematical interest to reduce the principal before they absolutely have to. By default, many institutions will take that extra $500 and route it into an institutional holding ledger known as a suspense account.
Or they might label it unapplied funds, right?
Yes,
A suspense account, it literally just sits there in limbo. It's suspended.
exactly. The bank's software logic dictates the customer has sent us surplus funds early. They must be paying next month's bill in advance. We will hold this $500 in the suspense account. We will not apply it to the principal today.
So they let the principal remain at its maximum high, continuing to calculate maximum daily interest against the customer every night at midnight.
And then, when the next official billing cycle triggers in 20 days, we will pull the $500 from the suspense account and apply it as a standard scheduled payment.
That is infuriating. It is legitimately deceptive. They take your money, they hold it in their own accounts, where they are undoubtedly earning overnight yield on it in the institutional markets, while simultaneously continuing to charge you maximum daily interest on a principal balance you actively tried to reduce.
You think you executed a kinetic strike, but the bank's UI just caught the bullet and put it in their pocket.
They neutralized your velocity through interface design.
The user interface is built to funnel you into the suspense account.
So how do we bypass it? How do we force the system to accept the mathematical reality of our strike?
You have to bypass the default buttons. The manifesto details that when you execute a strike, you must dive deeper into the payment portal. You have to hunt for a specific, often obfuscated option that designates the transfer explicitly as a principal-only overpayment.
Principal only.
Yes. Sometimes it's hidden under a drop-down menu labeled Payment Options or Advanced. Sometimes you literally have to call the servicer and instruct them to permanently configure your account to apply all overages directly to the principal on the day of receipt.
You have to legally force the servicer to bypass the suspense account. When you check that principal-only box, you are hard-coding an instruction into their system. You are telling the algorithm, do not hold this. Strike the core balance immediately today, so that when the midnight clock strikes, the interest calculation is permanently reduced.
If you fail to designate the strike correctly, the entire strategy collapses back into the amortization loop. You must become forensic about how your payments are applied. You must audit your statements to ensure the principal balance dropped the exact day the funds cleared. It is a game of millimeters, and the banks are counting on you not reading the fine print.
It really does feel like waking up from the Matrix. Once you see the suspense account trick, once you understand the midnight compounding clock, you can't unsee it.
No, you can't.
You look at traditional financial advice. You know, people telling you to just pay a little extra at the end of the month or to use the Snowball method for a mental boost. And you realize how utterly insufficient it is against the machinery of institutional debt.
Traditional advice treats the symptom. This methodology attacks the engine.
We have covered a tremendous amount of incredibly dense, paradigm-shifting ground today. Let's synthesize this. We started by discarding the financial therapy. We recognize that debt is not a moral weight. It is a big data problem requiring absolute capital efficiency.
We learned that every single cent is a deployable asset, and that capturing the effective spread by annihilating high-interest debt is the mathematical priority.
We established the critical necessity of defensive liquidity, building the bankruptcy threshold using the 72-hour rule to mathematically insulate our cash flow from systemic timing shocks and prevent the cascade of failure.
We rejected the emotional pacification of the debt snowball. We acknowledged the psychological friction of the avalanche priority, preparing ourselves for the long grind, and committing to target our highest rate liabilities regardless of the balance size.
We learned the mechanisms of the daily compounding clock and how to execute high-frequency principle strikes the exact moment our capital becomes available.
And finally, we uncovered the ultimate mechanical trap, the institutional suspense account, and learned how to legally force the banking interfaces to immediately reduce the core principal, securing our mathematical victories.
It is a comprehensive, ruthless blueprint. It requires immense discipline. It requires abandoning the desire for quick, comforting emotional wins. But the reward, as the Manifesto states, is total financial sovereignty.
Total sovereignty.
The challenge for you listening right now is to take this framework and audit your own ledger. Look at your checking account. Where's your friction? Look at your debts. What is your effective spread? Your ledger is no longer a source of anxiety. It is a battlefield where you now possess the architectural blueprints of the enemy's fortress.
You have the tools to transition from being the prey in the amortization loop to being the operator of your own financial machine. But as we close this deep dive, I want to pivot slightly and offer a final lingering thought.
Oh, please do.
We have spent an hour discussing the ruthless mathematics of wealth velocity. We have talked about how institutions weaponize time against you, calculating interest in the dark at midnight, stretching amortization schedules over 30 years to extract your future labor. But what is the actual point of building this machine?
That is the ultimate question. Why go to war?
Because we often confuse the byproduct of wealth with the purpose of wealth. People think the goal of financial sovereignty is the accumulation of objects, the houses, the cars, the luxury. But objects are static.
Right.
The Manifesto touches on a profound truth regarding the nature of time. If you are trapped in the amortization loop, you are actively subsidizing the bank's timeline. Your future labor, your future Tuesdays and Thursdays for the next 20 years are already promised to an institution to service the front-loaded interest of a daily compounding debt. You do not own your own future.
You are renting your life back from the bank.
Precisely. Once you execute the system, once you deploy absolute capital efficiency, intercept the compounding clock, and shatter the loop, you don't just gain a zero balance, you repossess your future labor.
Reclaiming your time.
The ultimate luxury that wealth buys isn't things. The ultimate luxury is the ability to dictate your own timeline. When you finally stop subsidizing the bank's time, the most terrifying and beautiful question remains. What will you do with yours?
Reclaiming your timeline. What an incredibly powerful place to leave this. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly intense journey today. We hope you walk away from this deep dive not just informed, but armed. The math is on your side if you choose to use it. Until next time.